finally, we have this episode. How are you, Martin?
I'm pretty good. Starting to get a little bit colder here now in where I am at, but that's just fine, I think.
Yeah. And yesterday we met physically to play some cub
We did.
with our colleagues. How did it go?
Not that well. I think my team finished number 3 or 4 teams, so wasn't dead last, but not really anything to write home about.
Yeah. Very nice to see everyone.
Yes,
Even
indeed.
though
I
you...
mean, we've been working remotely or from home, all of us for year and a half now, right? So
Yeah.
we haven't that many interactions.
No. Exactly. And this episode I will try to schedule for a long time, and it's since you published an article in April, I believe, which says digital platforms, how to choose what's best for your company.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to talk a bit about today. So we're going to link that in the description of this episode, so everyone can read that article as well. And we just try to dive a bit deeper into this subject this time.
Yeah.
But overall, could you start explaining what a digital platform is?
I mean, a digital platform is really kind of all the digital infrastructure company has or builds to really interact between colleagues and with its customers. So it's things like the web content management system, marketing automation system, CRM systems, customer support system, all of those different pieces that makes up a company's digital infrastructure, really, to facilitate commercial interactions.
So could
And
you give some examples of like brands?
I mean, on the highest level, you can talk about companies like Facebook or Google or Amazon and so on as being digital platforms. But really, every company that is kind of interacting with customers, buying and selling stuff online, will have some sort of digital platform. And historically, the way to do that is either you can build it kind of piecemeal and kind of put a lot of different infrastructure together to kind of internally put some sort of best of breed platform together, or increasingly there's different suppliers that are aiming to kind of supply a all-in-one platform. So whether that's kind of the CMS providers like Episerver or Adobe or something like that, or companies coming from the customer relationship management side of things like Salesforce, or marketing automation side of things like HubSpot, they all are kind of aiming to get to this one all-encompassing platform to help companies build that digital platform that they need.
Yeah, yeah. Because in the article you wrote that most organizations today have a jigsaw puzzle of disparate software. So could
Yeah.
you just explain a bit why it's like that today?
Well, I mean, it's mostly because of historical reasons. I mean, if you think about how most organizations, how most companies have built their IT infrastructure, I mean, going all the way back, it started with all of a sudden people need personal computers, right? So most IT organizations have started from the point of view. Uh, Staff or employees need digital tools. We need to source those tools. Typically, back in the day, if you go all the way back to the 90s, almost 80s, that's hardware, right? You need the tools to do your digital work, as it were. And then eventually, of course, those were networked. And so you need to kind of source servers and connect those devices between the employees. And then by the late 90s, everyone needs a website. So then you start building a website. And then you get more and more digital tools, and then you get things like sales guys need CRM tools, marketers need different marketing, digital marketing tools, and then you get like service people coming in and say we need some sort of digital service platform tools. So that's what happens over a long period of time. um, Most organizations have built from the inside out. You have a central kind of, let's call it an IT department, IT team that has on demand provided the organization what it needs in that point of time. And all of these different departments or portions of the company have kind of demanded things in different points in time. And therefore, there hasn't been a coherent kind of, we are building a system that works together. It's more like we added pieces, therefore piecemeal, as needed. And the result is that most organizations have this jigsaw puzzle of different parts that was never meant to kind of work together.
No. And is this the main challenge that digital platform companies trying to solve right now when they are?
Yeah, I mean, as most companies mature into kind of realizing that we need to facilitate sales digitally online, um, you start to think about it a little bit differently. So, have we built systems, or are we building systems just for our employees to be able to complete a task, or are we actually looking at it from the other point of view? If we're trying to create an ultimate customer experience, a customer journey, what kind of system do we need to build that? So it becomes very different depending on where you start in terms of what is your goal, what is it you're trying to accomplish. And more companies are coming to that realization, of course, that we are seeing more and more business transactions, communication, everything occurring online, and therefore we need to have a system that optimize towards that, rather than from a kind of physical world where we just optimize for individual departments or even individual employees.
Yeah. So how, like, if you're in a situation now as an organization having this jigsaw puzzle, what are the main challenges with finding one digital platform, one solution?
Well, it's. I mean, I say that you need to kind of consider first of who we are building the platform for, because it, as I said, it becomes a different thing if you start from the point of view that we are. Let's take this example. Let's say that you're a company that doesn't really interact with customers. Your main service might be some technical service. You provide field service technicians to do specific tasks. Right? Then you will build a IT infrastructure that your end user is really your field technician in that scenario, right? So you want to build something that works really well for them, that makes sure that they can do their work really well. However, for most organizations, the end user is really the customer or the prospective customer. So you're trying to build something that facilitates business, and you need to think about it from that point of view. What is it that the customer wants, needs, and how do I create an effortless way of interacting with my company and ultimately buy my products or services? So that's kind of the first task in terms of figuring out who is it that I am building the platform for.
Yeah.
And I mean, from that you can start to say, okay, assuming then that it is really about building your business, scaling your business, catering for your customers, then it becomes a question: how can I create an accurate, complete picture of my customers? The vast majority of companies today are, both organizational and from a technical perspective very siloed, right? So you have like a sales department that don't necessarily talk to the marketing department, that doesn't talk to the service department, and you have a financial system and so on. So in most organizations, it's almost impossible to kind of get an accurate view of the entire customer journey, or what we call a 360 view of the customer, because you have piecemeal information, some information in maybe a sales system, a CRM system, other information in a marketing system, a third piece of information in a customer support system, and so on. So to actually kind of then work to optimize the entire customer journey becomes almost impossible, because you can't just put the pieces of the puzzle together. So recognizing that that's one of the core ways of building your business in a digital world, to kind of make the entire customer journey as smooth as possible from the very kind of first interaction to a long-term high value customer, then you need to build a system that really caters towards that, right?
Yeah.
And thirdly, I would say it's you have to try to figure out what's your main aim. And what I mean with that is, um, you want to optimize the system while kind of shortening the time to market. So you want to optimize the time to completion, as well as maximize the outcome of the digital platform or the system you're trying to build. And sometimes there is or almost always there is a conflict between those two. I mean, you can always build a highly tailored system that caters to all your different stakeholders, all your different employees, and your current way of working, the way you think you're going to work. But that's typically going to cost more and take much longer time to do that. So you have to consider, if it's, can I compromise on some of those things? Maybe change my way of working, change the way how the organization works to some degree, and rather go for a all-in-one platform that maybe only meets 75 or 80% of your wished for requirements, but it's typically something that is requires less investment and is much quicker to implement, because it's a coherent system where you don't spend most of your time trying to custom build things. Rather, you then adapt your way of working for what that platform can do.
Yeah. So, according to your experience working with companies trying to help to build and find and identify this one digital platform, who at the company's site should be involved in such a project? And
I mean, this is a difficult question to answer, because it works a little bit differently in different companies. But I think one of the most important things is for the senior executive team, or at least someone representing the senior executive team, need to be kind of sponsor or involved heavily in this process, and recognizing that it's about the overall company or business success for most organizations. What you don't want to happen is to kind of just designate it to an IT person alone. I think IT needs to be involved, sales needs to be involved, marketing, service, and general kind of executive board level champion. Because at the end of the day, that is about creating the coherent system. Otherwise, it tends to be, you create again a sales system or a marketing system or an IT system that isn't necessarily catering for that overall success that you're aiming
yeah,
for.
and you mentioned earlier that because of these siloed departments, it's this has like resulted in the jigsaw puzzle. And now, when you're trying to find one solution where each department have their specific needs or routines or working with it, how do you overcome the conflict of interest between these departments? Or according to you, is there like when you work with it, do you identify conflict?
Well, I quite often there is in the sense that since you haven't historically maybe looked at it holistically, it's a bit counterintuitive, but going for the best of breed approach is usually not the best way of doing this. Meaning that, and that's where the conflict arises, right? So if I'm from sales, I want the best of breed sales solution, and if I'm from marketing, I want the best of breed marketing solution, and if I'm within the customer support team, I want the best of breed support system and so on. And that on you know on paper looks logical, right? We should supply the organization with the best of breed solutions, and they should all excel. But the problem is then that you end up with these systems that aren't really connected and doesn't talk to each other. So on a higher level, you can't get this overview, this 360 customer view that we talked about previously, and you end up spending a lot of resources, time, and money on trying to get these different systems to work together. Whereas if everyone compromised a little bit, say you get a good sales system, you get a great marketing automation system, and a decent service system, whatever it might be, but they all work together, and we as a company work together to create the ultimate customer journey, and we get all the analytics, we get the full view, and we can amend things across the board. That's typically much more valuable in the long term for organizations than saying that an individual has what they believe is the best system for them. So it's typically better to kind of change the way of working and change the organization a little bit to get a coherent system than going for the old best of breed approach.
Yeah. And you mentioned a 360-degree view of the customers. Could you just briefly explain what that could look like?
Well, so it's about being able to kind of get all the information for the full customer journey. So meaning that you can kind of see from the very first interaction, this is where the customer, or at that point the prospect, came from, what kind of content they consumed, how they interacted with our different touch points as a company, who they interacted with, what they think is good if we do surveys, nurturing them and see how they become customers, what they have bought from us, what they if they've interacted with the service department, what they think about that, and if they give reviews and so on, right? So what you get then is kind of the full view of the customer, and what that lends itself to is much higher level of personalization. So if you get kind of the full view of the customer in terms of all these different touch points, you have much more accurate data on the customer, and then you can personalize communication on a much higher level. So interacting with the customer at the right time, recognizing what they need, and so on. And you also create a much more consistent experience, because otherwise, typically, you could have like a great marketing experience which doesn't really resonate then when the customer get in touch with sales, or you have great sales experience, but once you become a customer, your service department or the experience of the service doesn't really meet those level of expectations. And thirdly, by doing this, you get much more analytics and insights, right? So you can, by kind of having the complete picture of a customer, you can create much more accurate segments, behavior models, and ultimately that will help you become much more relevant towards both your customers and your prospects. And it also lends itself to more things like doing predictive forecasts, seeing that prospects that are behaving this way typically want this kind of interaction or this information, or customers that have been customer for this period of time might need now this service component or this upgrade, or things like that. By having that full kind of view and a more coherent data model, you can do much more interesting things from a kind of forecasting and predictive level as well.
Yeah. Good. So finally, what could you share some learnings that you have from previous projects working with helping companies implementing digital platforms?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest learning is it tends to be the case that most companies go for kind of trying to build this best of breed thing, right? So you think about what's the best sales tool, what's the best marketing tool, and so on. And I mean, that's the way we've done things for the last 30 years almost, right? So it's not a big surprise that that's the case. But it's also once you kind of start talking to what it is you're really trying to accomplish and understand and recognizing that it might be better to have everything in one platform, have everything in Salesforce or everything in HubSpot or one of these kind of all-in-one platforms that really are putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. um, so that's typically a mind change that needs to happen in most organizations. The other thing I would say is that you really need all these different people on board. So if you're trying to do something purely from a marketing perspective or purely from an IT perspective, you tend to miss the bigger pieces of the puzzles. So it is really about trying to get that understanding from sales, marketing, services. Those typically are the big three pillars in most organizations, right? And kind of understand how does that work together with the overall idea of trying to create the best possible customer experience. So starting with a customer experience approach rather than starting from an organizational approach is usually the biggest key to success.
With those words, I think we are done with this episode. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.